Let's talk about music. Welcome back to Perfect Albums. In the first Perfect Albums video, I talked about the albums that are most important to me, the ones that have gotten me to where I am today. This time around I want to cover more of the same, but these albums in this video are all ones that I found somewhat recently. The definition of a perfect album has remained unchanged. I still define it as an album with no bad or weak songs, but I think it definitely helps if the album has a story or some sort of meaning behind it. This time around I'm going to be venturing into artists I'm less familiar with, songs that are new to me, and some genres that are outside the realm of what I'm used to. When I was first getting into future funk, one of the artists that I was first exposed to was Macross8299. His music helped create my love for future funk, but after a long break of listening to other artists, this summer I stumbled upon an album by him that would impact my taste in music more than I could have ever realized. Macross8299 is an artist who has had a huge impact on the landscape of future funk. Throughout his career, he's created some of the most influential songs in future funk, making songs like Fun Tonight and Miss Macross, which became instant classics. But for the longest time, my only problem with Macross8299's music was his albums. I've spent a good portion of my time listening to this genre trying to find the perfect Macross album. Most of Macross8299's discography is extremely varied. I'll find songs that blow me away with the amount of polish and atmosphere that's gone into them, completely capturing the vibe of the Japanese city pop scene of the late 20th century. But there will also be some songs that just don't appeal to me personally as much. I've searched for a while, but I couldn't find the Macross album that perfectly told the story I was so desperately looking for. That was until I discovered A Million Miles Away. I remember writing a paper for a class and listening to it on my quest to find that perfect Macross album and just being blown away by it start to finish. The 10-song album is chock full of the finest city pop remixes future funk has to offer. Songs like 8299 FM and Bad Girl are energetic and upbeat, feeling vibrant and colorful. Songs like Night in Tokyo Part 2 take out a chilled out theming, making them the perfect mood music for anything happening late at night. And songs like Fugaz and Lovers take on a very subdued theming, almost feeling gloomy. And I think it was somewhere in the middle of this album, when I was probably 1 or 2 pages into my paper, when I realized just how perfect it is. Albums like Cham and Sailor Wave may be more well known within the community, but this album is by far Macross's best work. It's an album that helped to create future funk itself. It set the standard for how future funk should and shouldn't be defined, and it still holds up brilliantly to this day, 6 years after its initial release. This is a landmark for future funk. It set a very high standard for artists to follow, and it shaped the genre. It's Macross8299's de facto album. Some of his greatest songs he's ever created are on here, and I think it's beautiful the impact this album has had. In 2014, Young Bae's debut album, Bae, came out. It had huge influences from city pop and Japanese culture, and the songs on the album were very fast-paced and energetic. It would seem that Young Bae was creating a style all to his own that was truly unique to him. He dropped a monumental first album onto the future funk community before going dormant for almost 2 years, eventually releasing a whole bunch of music in 2016. But this time it was different. Young Bae had a new style entirely. He had somewhat abandoned his Japanese city pop style in favor for slow remixes of American soul and disco music. And while the music is well made, I have to admit, these kinds of songs don't really do it for me. They're great, easy listening music, and a lot of the songs sound good on a surface level, but there was no 2016 project from Young Bae that had a real lasting impact on me. Except for one. Skyscraper Anonymous is a breath of fresh air in terms of Young Bae's music. It's the first album of his to see an official release on Spotify, which subverts the Bae labeling that all his other albums have received. It's the only album of Young Bae's that has taken on his new style that's had any sort of lasting impact on me in any form. And I think that has to do with how polished the music feels. The album isn't boring with its pacing. Even when the songs' BPM are slow, the songs feel incredibly upbeat and filled with energy. They emanate a feeling that makes them perfect to dance along to, and the whole album just radiates positive energy. It's a very happy album in songs like I Wanna Be With You and sad in songs like Come Back. It manages to balance the dichotomy between these diametrically opposed emotions perfectly, and I think the reason why this is the Young Bae album that sticks with me is because this album is what got me through the winter of 2018. I remember listening to songs like Skyscraper Anonymous and Come Back with friends on cold September mornings before school began, or on Friday nights when we'd go walking around the neighborhood. I think part of the reason I love this album over other Young Bae albums is because of that significance it holds to me. How it became the album I listened to 24/7, how I fell in love with the jazzy melodies of the album, and how it became a nostalgic and easy to listen to album that I can always come back to. Desired is nothing if not a consistent artist. The music that he's made has a consistent style to it. I covered his album Love Story last time, but Desired's following albums would be somewhat hit and miss. They'd all have incredible gems on each of them, 3 or 4 songs that are amazing, incredible songs that shape what I think about when the phrase future funk is mentioned. But the rest usually are less good, at least for me. They're not bad songs necessarily, but they can't match the energy of the highlights in these albums. And for a while I thought that Love Story was an outlier of Desired's discography. But as I'd let my playlist trail off into the recommended section, an album just kept popping up over and over, and before I realized it, I had accidentally listened to the entire album. And that album is, of course, Plastic Whatever. Plastic Whatever is great. It's one of the best encapsulations of that 80s vibe so many artists try and go for. A true step up from Love Story. This is the bread and butter of future funk. What you see is what you get, and what you see is an incredibly polished album with every song feeling nostalgic and just perfect with every beat and every note. The vocals and melodies are just begging to get stuck in your head, and each and every individual song feeling differently nostalgic in their own way. It's almost like each song is a different memory which has been perfectly encapsulated in the form of a song. A permanent and perfect record of that memory. To me, Plastic Whatever tells the story of a bustling American mall filled with neon. Can't Find Out is the perfect intro to this album because it draws you in. It has that high energy that would draw listeners to the album. But then songs like Plastic Life and Neon Maze feel consumeristic, like you're inside that mall where everything is made out of plastic. It still has that energy from the beginning, but the steam is running out. By the time commercial break plays, the atmosphere is gloomy, almost eerie, like everyone has left that mall to rot, and the spirit of consumerism has been abandoned, leaving the mall without a purpose. Every song after this feels hollow, like it's trying to recapture those memories from the mall, but that gloomy feeling still looms above the entire rest of this album. Finally, we're left with Plastic Little, the perfect send-off for an album like this. It feels bittersweet like the rest of the album, but the music has a tinge of hope in it. This album makes me feel real nostalgia for a time before I was even an idea, which I think is part of the reason I listen to future funk in the first place. It definitely helps that a lot of my childhood was spent in this mall, which by the time I spent my days in it had become a shell of its former self, which eventually got torn down and repurposed. And I think one of the reasons I associate this album with that mall is because I can relive those dusty old memories through the songs in this album.
Listening to you.
I've expressed my love for Uniwa's music on this channel before in a number of ways, and my opinions remain unchanged. I still think he's one of the most underrated voices in the future funk community. I still think that he's making some of the most unique music I've ever heard, and he's still doing what he wants to do in his universe of music. Date of Forever was the first full project of Uniwa's that I listened to start to finish without any breaks or pauses. It was the first album of his that I got to have as a full experience, and after listening to a lot of other Uniwa albums, I have to say that this one is my favorite. It's 22 songs of radiant, atmospheric energy that is reminiscent of Discovery by Daft Punk. It has the same feeling a soundtrack to a science fiction movie would have, feeling galactic and universal yet technological in the way it sounds, most likely due to the way the samples are cut up and utilized, and the choice of samples themselves. The atmosphere represents the vast emptiness of space and the mystery surrounding it, but also encompasses the scientific and technological advancements that would need to happen before that mystery could be solved. When I listen to songs like You're Everything I've Ever Wanted and 1997, I can't help but notice the space-like feeling they give off. But songs like Letters from Afar and All Night are deeply reminiscent of more chilled-out songs on Discovery, only having that feeling that only a Uniwa song can have. 22 perfect songs is no easy feat, but Uniwa pulls it off. The songs switch genres quite often, jumping from future funk to vaporwave to neither. But the thing about this album is that the songs all maintain that technological atmosphere. The songs all feel vague and eerie. They give off this aura that makes you want to dig deeper, to figure them out and to understand them. And that's exactly what I tried to do. I spent hours listening to this album, analyzing each song, and trying to come to an understanding with this album. There were some times where I loved certain songs off this album, where I couldn't stop listening to this album, and then there were periods where I was sick of it and I didn't want to listen to it. But after a long period of indifference and a re-listen, I really loved this album. It's a beautiful piece of art, and even if it was difficult to find that meaning in this album, I'm glad I did it.
Last time on Perfect Albums.
Before I end this video, I really want to thank you, the viewer. I know this is kind of cliche, but really, thank you. I've watched a ton of video essays like this before, and I never thought that I could make one myself. The fact that you are watching this means that I've accomplished something I didn't think I'd be able to do. Stick around, I'll be making more videos like this. I might even make a sequel to this one as long as I find more albums to write about. I love music. I love the music I listen to. Angry is still one of my favorite artists in the future funk scene. I was pretty confident for a while that Road Trip couldn't be topped, and while it is still yet to be completely succeeded, Angry pushed an EP onto Spotify which almost takes the cake. I say almost because, like with Road Trip, my only problem with this album is that it's too short, especially with it being only 6 songs. But even with that 6-song limitation, it's crazy how much there is to this album. The first 2 songs are bright and beautiful, yet buoyant and energetic. They almost overpower the listener with bliss, but by Sidechain My Heart, the album takes a little bit of a sadder turn. It's not really clear why, as the music doesn't give us much to go off of, but by Caroline, the album reaches its emotional crux, which almost feels like a tender moment of admittance between friends. The album would no doubt be Angry's best work if extended. The emotional shift this album undertakes would be much more natural if it was given more songs to ease into this transition. This album is still incredible though, there's no bad song here. Each song is polished, they all sound wonderful to listen to, and every song on this album just gets stuck in your head endlessly. They exude that summer energy, that cheery, bright, upbeat sound that Angry is known for. It's the perfect music for a sunny drive or a day on the beach. Angry's music has an innate welcoming aura to it, and I'm sure the next project that he puts out will continue this streak of perfection.
Oh yeah. Hold a cold one like he hold an old gun, like he hold a microphone and stole the show for fun, or a foe for ransom. Flows is handsome, O's in tandem, anthem, random, tantrum, phantom of the grand.
MF Doom is an artist who's especially known for his unique wordplay. He's an extremely well-respected artist in the hip-hop community. I had heard MF Doom's name thrown around a few times before I listened to Mad Villainy, but I need to give a quick thanks to L. Fritz for putting me onto this album. Since he recommended it to me in the 3 months since Perfect Albums 1, it's become one of my favorite albums to listen to when I'm doing nothing else. Every time I listen to it, I catch something new, maybe a double meaning to a line or a metaphor that MF Doom uses. It's always an amazing listen because I can expect it to be a different experience every time. The album has almost a dark tone to it, adopting samples and themes from mid-20th century gangster crime dramas. The album doesn't necessarily feel like it goes out of its way to be dark and gritty, but it represents the real world in a way that doesn't hold back any punches. Songs like Meat Grinder feel dark and underground. Songs like All Caps are energetic but keep that dark atmosphere, and Rhinestone Cowboy, the final track, feels like the soundtrack to a sunrise. The theming of these songs can make them sound old, but not dated. They just feel classic. It's easy to empathize when Doom talks about his struggles, mostly because it's clear it's coming from a place of sincerity. This album feels more like a complete story rather than a compilation of songs. It's honest, it's hard-hitting, it's clever, and most importantly, it becomes more meaningful every time you listen to it.
It's about to storm. We're actually under a tornado watch.
Now, this is another album that I'm still sort of formulating my thoughts on. I only found this album a month or two ago, but I had to write about it after listening to it a couple of times. I had never really heard of Kill Bill before this album. I had a friend who I knew who liked some of his music, but I never really heard anything from him until one day by random chance I just got recommended RPG by Spotify. The song's instrumental immediately caught my attention, and I listened to it a couple times trying to sort of make sense of it. And after listening to it a couple times and sort of putting together the pieces, I was kind of taken aback that I hadn't heard of this guy before. Kill Bill paints vivid imagery with his wordplay, having one bar spill into the next in a way that makes his music sound incredibly satisfying to listen to. He'll change flow every few bars, making every second feel meaningful in its own right. Each song grips you. It's incredibly easy to follow along because every song feels like one long run-on sentence that somehow makes perfect sense. What really makes this album stand out is the sampling. Sometimes the samples almost feel robotic. Sometimes they'll use instrumentals like synths and guitars, and other times they're very, very abstract, like the emergency alert sample in Resonance. Despite this, the samples never really feel out of place. They all somehow feel theme appropriate for the subject matter of each song. All of these samples help to create kind of a strange and bizarre atmosphere that stood out to me and made me want to keep listening. But that strange atmosphere only made this album sound more unique and appeal more to me. No two songs sound really alike. They change style so much that it's easy to notice little touches to each song that you miss on a first listen. This album is a journey, an introspective, personal compilation of songs designed to make you feel something. It's a rainy night alone, a quiet drive to yourself, a memory that sticks out in your mind even if it's not of anything exceptional. I love this album. It's an emotional flurry that channels the feelings of its creator perfectly. I like the kind of music that puts me on edge, music that subverts my expectations and surprises me. This kind of music can be seen as pointless to some, but to me that controlled chaos is something that I actively seek out. That being said, I'm pretty new to this type of music. I'm still stuck in that space where I like the music I'm hearing, but I don't really know where to find more of it. I haven't really heard anything else from Machine Girl, but from the first time I heard it, Wolf Girl hooked me. The harsh electronic sounds of the album almost sounding glitchy drew me in, but the melodies melodies in the music really kept me hooked, with the contrast it created with the other sounds in the songs. I loved the sort of alarming style of the music in Wolf Girl. It was really startling and caught me off guard in a way that I hadn't experienced much before. I remember listening to the first songs on the album and almost turning the album off just because I wasn't really hooked on it, but I decided to give it a chance and keep it playing anyways. That's when Crystal URL Cyber Palace Mix played, which made me do the auditory version of a double take. The intro into the first part of the song with the alarm sample and almost droning electronic noises caught my ear, but it wasn't until the break in the middle that I realized just how much I was enjoying the music. After that song, I listened to the entire album. It became the one thing that I was listening to at any given time. I was fixated on this album. I loved the contrast of the beautiful melodies mixed with the harsh, crashing sound of the rest of the music. Every song feels so perfect, like the spot that it's in, the amount of seconds, the runtime of the album, it all feels purposeful. The album has an almost foreboding aura to it, even in the less heavy songs like Gabber Trap Remix and the aforementioned Cyber Palace Mix. The atmosphere isn't exactly happy. There aren't really any breaks in Wolf Girl. There are no spaces to catch your breath. It grips you from the start of MG1 and doesn't loosen its grip until MG2. It's the kind of music that I'm sure can give off a chaotic vibe, but to me, again, feels like that controlled chaos. The harsh sounding nature of the music gives the music a harsh feeling, but that's not a bad thing. The album rarely uses samples, but when it does, it's only to add to the atmosphere that's already there. You'll listen to a song off this album and spend 20 seconds waiting on the edge of your seat for the music to hit that stride, and when it finally does, it's satisfying. That purely electronic sound this album has gives it an almost threatening vibe to it. It makes the album sound alive in a way that I'm still yet to see replicated.
Yo.
Listen, I know this was kind of a long video, but I appreciate any of you who stuck around until the end. I've been planning this project for almost 3 months, since the first Perfect Albums video. I've been compiling albums together and listening to a lot of new music. I didn't think I was going to make a second Perfect Albums video, but when I started to envision what it would look like in my head, I realized that I had more than enough albums to make a second video. It's been really hard not to tell any of my friends about this project, mostly because I really wanted to keep it a secret until the video was out, and I'm glad I kept it a surprise. Since the first Perfect Albums video, my channel size has quadrupled, which I'm extremely grateful for. If my videos can reach someone who shares my love for these albums, then it makes all the work I put into them worth it. I love music, and I found after the first video that I especially like rationalizing why I like music so much. And making that first Perfect Albums video really did make my love for my music get significantly larger. I really love the music that I listen to, and I've been happy to expand my musical horizons over the past few months. It's been great getting to talk to artists of different genres and fans of the music I like, because up until now it's been hard to find other people who like the music I do. The events after Perfect Albums 1 have shaped the course of my entire channel, and even though I think the video hasn't aged amazingly, I think my videos are a little bit better now, it's still one of the things I'm proudest of, and following through with that video was by far the best decision I've made this entire year.